So this is the harness that I got on eBay or Amazon, but the problem is on some of the diagrams and stuff are just completely wrong. All right, well, just like that, the wiring underneath is done. Welcome back to another episode of Rusto Mod. We are back on the 1976 Buick Skylark, our budget boosted Buick build, and I am so excited to finally be working on this thing again. Now I know it's been a little bit since I've posted a video. My life has been insane lately. In the last few weeks I actually got married, so it had a little bit of an impact on my time schedule and everything. I was trying to get ready for the wedding and everything like that, and I've been trying to put together our Patina Party car show that we're having on August 17th. I'm not sure if this video is going to come out before or after that event, but regardless, it's going to be a great time and I hope I see a lot of you guys there. But in today's episode, we're going to be working on our budget boosted Buick. Now, if you guys aren't familiar with this build, it's a pretty cool one. So we ended up finding this Buick Skylark in a junkyard and we said, man, that thing's really cool. We could probably do something with that. We snagged the thing for 200 bucks, which is pretty crazy in today's market. We ended up getting it running and driving, but unfortunately the carburetor overflowed and it ended up catching on fire. So we were like, what are we gonna do with this thing now? So we got a Silverado. We ended up parting the Silverado out and we yanked the motor out of the Silverado and slapped it in our Buick here. Then our buddies at Max Heating Rod sent us some turbos for this thing. So we tried to put a camshaft and do a bunch of stuff to the motor to get it ready for boost. So we're doing a twin turbo setup on this. We're trying to do it on a budget and we're trying to have as much fun as we can along the way. So we have a lot of stuff to go on the project, but I really want to start tackling this thing because I really want to hear this thing run and finally get this thing driving. Now I'll kind of jump back to the small shop where we left off and then get you guys up to speed on what we've been doing with this thing. So under the hood, I've been kind of playing with this thing, trying to mock some stuff up. Like you can see, I bought a radiator hose for the Rambler and I never used it, so I was thinking I could try to make it work on this. Tried to make some elbows to go to our intercooler, which this is almost done. I did change some fuel lines around and stuff, but pretty much everything is the same as it was. So the next really big thing on this car is the wiring. I ended up finding a schematic for this because if you guys remember, what we're going to do is we're just going to use the factory Buick harness and we're going to end up tying a eBay harness that I got for pretty cheap into the Buick harness and then using the stock computer to run everything. So that's how we're going to do it for now. But before we do the wiring, I want to try to tie everything up that I have left. I'm probably going to end up taking this car up to the big shop so that way we can finish all the wiring and stuff. And we have a 2-post lift there, so it'll be a little bit easier for me to work on the exhaust with the wheel out of the way. I can end up making all the pipes and everything, and it'll just be a lot easier for me to do it. So I'm gonna leave all the stuff like wiring and fabricating that exhaust up there. Now before I bring it up to the big shop, I can't really put this thing on a trailer and take it up there because the hood isn't latched down. We ended up removing all this stuff so that way we could fit our intercooler, but because of that we can't really fit our hood latch. I got these hood pins on Amazon and I'm gonna put these in. Now we are trying to keep this kind of a budget sleeper car, so these are a little bit more lower profile. You're not really going to see them as much. I really like how these work. I've used these in the past and they work really good. So I'm going to try to throw these in real quick so that way our hood can stay down. Alright, so doing hood pins in this car is pretty simple. So all I did was take out the little adjuster on the core support where the hood rests and I popped that thing out and I'm just going to stick this right in place of it. There's a perfect size hole, so that'll stick up like this. When we put the hood down, we can mark where this is going to go. We can drill our hole for the rest of the assembly, and then we can hole saw a hole for this, put it in there, and it should be done. Alright, so I got my 2 hood pins in the core support. I kind of just slammed the hood down so that way I could see where the mark is that I have to go for the pin. So now I'm just going to drill that hole out and then find a hole saw big enough for this receiver end to go on there. Drill that hole and we should be good to go. right, so I got my hole drilled in there, and boom, you can see the receiving end is down there on the core support, and then I got my socket end. Now what's pretty cool about these is they click on, but you can actually have this at a different angle, so that way if your hood's not perfectly straight, it wouldn't really matter. It does, as long as it clicks in, it should work. So I really like these. They're pretty cheap on Amazon. I'll try to link them down below because I use these quite a bit on different fasteners. I actually had these in the trunk of the all-wheel drive C10, so you can click these and lift up the compartments in the bed. So they work good for a lot of different stuff. So I'm gonna slap this on real quick, and then I'll show you guys what it looks like. Also, if you guys are cringing because I'm cutting up this hood, don't worry. It's very well rotted. Someone had just painted over it. It's not a very good hood. I'm not wasting good car parts by just drilling holes in it. This thing isn't worth a whole lot. Alright, so it's easy as that. We have our hood pins installed, and they're pretty low profile. So you just hit that, and then you can pop the hood. So that worked out really good, really easy, and it looks low profile. There's not anything sticking out of the hood. I like it. We're still trying to keep the sleeper look a little bit on this thing, so that's kind of the best way I could do it. Alright guys, it's been a few days. I got all the cars flipped around because we're trying to get ready for a Patina party this year. And I got the Buick up off the lift, so I'm gonna try to take this thing to the big shop so that way we get the wiring done. Now it is a few days before our Patina party car show, so I'd like to get as much done as I can for the show. My original goal was to have it running by then, but probably not gonna work out. We have a lot of stuff going on in the background in preparation for the show. I'm gonna take this thing to the big shop and we can start to work on this thing. So I gotta load it up on the trailer and head that way. Alright, I got the Buick unloaded off the trailer and we're gonna knock out some stuff today. We're kind of working on a bunch of stuff in the shop, but I want to try to get the intercooler piping completed. So basically I pie cut some of this stuff and I had a bunch of clamps routed together and I kind of marked where I want this stuff welded. So I'm gonna go off like that and then have a straight piece to the intercooler. So I got these marked up, so we're gonna go ahead and weld this stuff up so that way our charge pipe to the engine will be completed. Alright guys, I got the Buick pushed in the shop here and I've been tinkering with it a little bit, trying to get everything dialed in. So you can see our intercooler piping, we ended up getting welded. So that's really nice. I was just gonna use clamps on it, but since I brought it here, I might as well just weld the thing up. So we got that welded, I put it in and it fits really good. Been trying to mess with some other stuff under the hood. As you can see, I got the upper radiator hose is completely done. I did have to get a reducer to go from the size on the radiator to the smaller inlet on the engine, but that worked out really good. And then down below, I did get the lower radiator hose on there as well. I was missing the thermostat housing, but I put that on there real quick just to make sure that everything fits. So the radiator hoses should be pretty much done. I did end up pulling the turbos off because I had to get the V-band that goes from the turbo to the flange that I'm using welded on there. I wanted someone that had a little bit more experience with welding than I do to weld that thing on there correctly. So I pulled those off and I'll show you guys what I had to do with that. So he went ahead and helped me weld this thing on the end here so that way we can finish the exhaust. So I just gotta reassemble the turbo. It's pretty easy, it's just the bolts around the bottom, popped it off. So put this back together and then we can throw these back on the Buick and we can try to dial in the rest of the exhaust. Alright, so I put my turbos together. They're all ready to go back on the car. So I'm going to throw those on real quick and then I can go ahead and make my turbo drains down to that timing cover that we had put on earlier. I want to try to start wiring this thing because that's going to be the one limitation and kind of the whole reason I brought it to the big shop, since we have everything to wire it here. So I want to try to start knocking that stuff out. So that'll be huge because that way I can get all this other stuff dialed in and then we can at least get the thing running. All right, so I got the turbos back in there and they look pretty good. Everything looks like it lines up still. So I got the gaskets in between there, so the turbos should be mounted for the final time. I do have to find some hardware just to mount it permanently, but those are pretty much done. So the next thing I got to do is figure out this wiring harness. So this is the harness that I got on eBay or Amazon, I can't remember, but I remember it was very cheap, under $100. Comes with its own fuse box and all the connectors and stuff that you should need to be able to run. Now I'll go through this to see if this thing actually is worth the money or not, but it seems like it should be pretty simple. And we did have our PCM VATs deleted where it won't let you start the vehicle with the original key. We disabled all that stuff and we actually calibrated the tune for the injectors and stuff that we have in here. Remember, we have our Snake Eater Performance Series injectors in this thing. So we're gonna try to get this thing wired up and figure out everything that we're kind of missing, because there is some stuff that we're missing here. So the one thing I do have to get is some coil packs. So I gotta try to find those, see if I can throw those on there real quick. Hopefully they clear with our headers on here, and then I can hook the top end of this stuff up. Well, I can't find my coil packs anywhere, but luckily I have this other part out Silverado that I might use for a future project. So I'm gonna just pull them off here and then try to use these ones. All right, I got the coil packs on. It looks like I'm gonna have some spark plug wire issues, so I'm gonna look to get those ceramic ones that I have on the Rambler. Those work pretty good, but they are really close to the header and literally almost touching it, so gonna probably have to address that, but it'll work for now until I get the new ones in. So luckily I had that truck outside that I'm gonna use for something else, so good to rob some parts off of it. So I do have the coil packs mounted and we can hook everything up on the top end there. All right, so I'm gonna start routing the harness. So how it kind of wants to be laid out is it has a firewall grommet, so that's gonna go through the firewall, and then they want all this stuff on the inside, so like the computer, this fuse box, and the OBD2 port, and then the rest of the gauge wires are down here. So the rest of the harness is gonna go to the engine bay. So what I'm thinking is I'm probably just going to cut a hole in this panel that we put in here for the AC delete. I'll probably try to put it down in this corner, and then I can run everything nice and low outside here and then plug everything in. I'm gonna have to feed it through the inside, so I'm gonna pull everything out from the glove box so that way I can get to that. Try to drill it from the inside because it'll be kind of hard to access down there, then start feeding the wires through. All right, so I got the harness pulled through. They do give you a lot of length on the wires, which is kind of nice. For our application, we don't really need this much length, so I can slide that grommet up there, and I guess I'll just have to coil the rest of the harness up under the dash. So now I have to kind of figure out where all these connectors go. So in the instructions, they do kind of give you an idea of what is what, because kind of like a Holly harness, which I'm normally used to, everything's labeled. So it doesn't have any labels on it, but they do give you a diagram of what the plugs are. So now I'm just gonna go through, plug everything in, make sure that everything's in the right spot, and then I'll have to see how we can try to adapt to the computer and mount that on the inside and then wire everything up from under the dash. All right, I've been going through the Buick, trying to figure out where everything on the harness is going. It did have that little instruction booklet here, So it helps somewhat, but the problem is on some of the diagrams and stuff are just completely wrong. Like they're for a different fuse box and stuff. This fuse box looks like this. The diagram looks like this. It's just completely different. So I kind of figured there'd be some weird stuff like that since this harness is really cheap, but at least it's here and it looks like almost everything's there. The one thing this does have, which I'm gonna warn you guys about if you do end up going this route, there's no oil pressure sensor here, which is really weird because we ended up labeling all the loose wires down here for the gauges, and it does have an oil pressure sensor gauge, but in the harness, there's no plug that goes to the oil pressure sensor. So that's weird. Not really a big deal. I can run a manual gauge or something for the oil pressure sensor, but just something that you wouldn't really think about they don't have on this harness because it's probably the cheapest one you can get. I just wanted to try to explain what we're doing with the Buick wiring harness. This is pretty much all we need from the Buick. All these power wires, these big red ones, are tied together. We're going to run these two power wires to the alternator, and then the original starter wire here and the signal wire, the purple wire, is going to go down to the starter. So we have to extend these because the starter's on the other side now. The alternator wire we don't need anymore. That was originally in the harness because we have the harness has an alternator wire in it, so that's going to go be controlled by the computer, so we don't need this wire. And then we're going to use the coil wire for the key on, so that's going to go inside to the fuse box and power all that. So we're going to run this through the grommet over there, so that can go inside. And then the only other thing we have to hook up is some grounds, and that should pretty much be it. And we do have to run the battery, like I said, in the trunk to here. Other than that, all the rest of the wiring is pretty simple. So we're just going to wire this up real quick, and the engine harness should be pretty much done. So I mounted the fuse box kind of where the air conditioning stuff was originally, so you can get to it through the glove box here. So on this setup, you have an ignition relay and you have a fuel pump relay that you can wire up. There's not a fan relay in this kit, so just keep that in mind. If you guys go this route, you're gonna have to wire up your own fan relay. But there is a fuel pump relay that is in here, but there's no leads for wiring in their loom for a fuel pump. So you're gonna have to add your own wires to the relay on the harness here. So there is a wire for the fan, so you can tie that into the computer so it can control the fan. It's kind of challenging to figure out. We had to kind of de-pin the PCM to make sure that which one was which, because we didn't know if this was a fan or a fuel pump relay. So it's a fuel pump relay, and then you have to add your own fan relay, which kind of makes sense. All right, so we've pretty much finished up all the wiring on the top end of the car. So you can see here, we went through this factory grommet and we hooked all the wires that we needed from the original Buick harness to the harness from eBay. We also hooked up our fan wire and stuff through that grommet, and we hooked up the fuel pump wire and stuff, so that way we can run that back down underneath the car to the fuel pump. So I'm probably gonna mount the battery in the trunk. So now we're gonna have to hook the battery cables up, run them all the way up front here to the starter, and that really should be it. It's really not that bad. Probably wired this in about a day. It's taken us 2 days just on and off, but really simple. I definitely would recommend this harness to somebody if they're just doing a basic swap kind of like this and just trying to do it on a budget. Pretty happy with it now. Obviously we haven't started it, see if the thing even works, but so far so good. Hopefully this thing works out pretty well. So now we're gonna push the Buick back up on the lift, finish everything underneath, and we should wrap up the entire wiring harness on this project. All right, so in the trunk here, we have measured where we want the battery cables to go through. So we're gonna run those down under the car. We're gonna drill some holes for the cable grommets to go through, and then we come out the battery back here and then run the cables. right, well, just like that, the wiring underneath is done. So if you can see in here, we got our starter wired up, and then we got our fuel line run down here with our power cable to the back. So our battery wire is coming out here. Fuel pump is wired, ready to go. That starter's wired, ready to go. So that's just about it on the wiring in the Buick. So if you guys are doing a budget wiring swap, if you're just throwing an LS in something, pretty simple way to do it. But I'm pretty beat today, and I think we got a ton covered on the Buick in this episode. I'll try to link that wiring harness down below. Check out the next episode where hopefully we try to fire this thing up for the first time and we can see how that wiring harness actually works. So stay tuned for that. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe so you can stay up to date on all the episodes we have here on Rustomod. Also, make sure you check out our Patina Party Car Show August 17th, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thanks for watching.